What we did was, really heavy reliance on email blasts. We sent all of our lists, multiple email blasts. Our engagement consultants sent a number of email blasts. We try to connect to organizations to spread the word through their networks. Just in terms of what we sent out, what we saw was we had an open rate of 25 to 35%. We actually had one follow-up email that got 60% of the people who received it opened it up. So we're really, really excited. People are paying attention. Those are really, really good rates for that. In terms of the media, we had 6 preview stories and then 6 follow-up stories after the event was held. Our Facebook friends are up to 521 people. The week of the event, we reached an audience of 8,500 people. That's people that follow us resharing to the people who follow them.
Excuse me, Craig, we need to use the mics for the recording. Thanks.
All right.
Sorry about that.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have 270 followers on Twitter now. And through both events that we've had so far, we've had really, really good experiences with people sort of spreading the word leading up to it, and then sort of highlighting what they're hearing throughout the event. So we're continuing to get the word out, not just through our own efforts, but from the people who are being engaged. The first thing that we had people do when they arrived to the kickoff was walk through a series of big changes, kind of the key trends and current issues facing Nashville. This was to really get people thinking about what are the long-term trends and issues that we're facing. So it's not just pie in the sky stuff. It's really rooted in what we're experiencing right now, looking at demographic changes, education and youth, environment, changing economy, and our infrastructure. After they went through that, all the participants had an opportunity to do a number of different visioning exercises rooted in 3 questions that we want to know about for the future. What do you love about Nashville now? What needs to be improved? And what would you like for the future? This is the core of what we're going to be doing for the next several months so that we can build a really robust vision that represents where Nashvillians want to go. In addition to the sticky note exercise, we also had a whiteboard exercise where people were able to spin a wheel, get a word at random, and then sort of fill in what they wanted for that word in the future. In this case, we have Nashville in 2040 is sustainable because of healthy food options, healthier schools, that sort of thing. What's really great about this activity is not only do we record this input, so it goes into our big database of all of our comments, we also put this up online on our Facebook page so that people who were there can share it. Hey, this is what I did. And also so that people who weren't there can kind of put a face to some of the input that we're getting. That makes it more visceral than just if we put up a list of comments. The highlight of the event was Governor Paris Glendening talking about the role of cities today. He was introduced by a spoken word artist from Southern Word, and then he was followed up by the mayor talking about kind of his vision for the plan and his challenge to the community to participate. We had 304 actual sign-ins. Our estimate is 400 to 500 people, maybe over 500. We also distributed comment cards for people to tell us what they thought of the event, rank us on a number of facets, and then give us demographics. You've got copies of these at the podium, but I wanted to give you a chance to look at them while I go through them. A couple of key things that we saw. First was the event worth your time on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being worst, 5 being best. 88% of people rated it a 4 or 5. And then, would you attend another event? Literally every single person said yes that we heard from. So we're really excited. We've seen that consistently across everything that we asked. So we think we're really tapping into a lot of interest in the community for doing this plan. In terms of the demographics on the back of that page, I want to walk you through how we use these, what these charts say. First, the blue bar is the Census 2010 figures for Davidson County. The red circle are the demographics of people who turn the comment cards back into us at the kickoff. So you can see for the gender split, male-female, we're pretty close. However, on the renter-owner split, you can see there's a big gap. How we use that is to help us see, first, interpret what we're hearing, and then second, understand where we need to reach to better. And so this gives us information that over the next 4 or 5 months, we really need to look at how do we get to renters to get them more involved. And you can see on that sheet, we go through all of the demographics that we were tracking. The only one that we track that's not on there is geography, just because we got it in raw zip code form and haven't been able to process that yet. The other major gap we're seeing is in educational attainment, which is pretty standard. So that's something going into this. I think we were pretty well aware we needed to work on that. We've also had a chance to enter in all of the comments at this point. We haven't processed them very thoroughly, but we have done a quick coding of what plan element they relate to. Out of 564 comments, clearly the land use, transportation, and infrastructure is leading the way there. Livable and healthy community and arts and culture, we've gotten a lot of comments on. If you go down, by the time you get to safety, you see we're not hearing as much. And I think this is getting into some, to some extent, who we're hearing from as well. Because certainly in our random surveying that we've done, safety comes out as the third or fourth priority. So this is partly how we use that demographic information.
Can I ask you a question at this point? Are these the major breakdowns that are going to be itemized in the final report?
Yeah, this is the chapters that we're anticipating for the plan. Yeah. In addition, we're also really trying to get the word out to people to participate on our online discussion site at talk.nashvillenext.net. So far, we've had about 470 people visit the site, 4,700 page views. Of that, we have 124 people who have signed in and are participating in some way, 62 ideas, but a couple hundred people have liked different ideas or made some kind of comment. Rick mentioned Mitchell Silver on Monday night, standing room only. You'll see his presentation later on if you've got the time. And then in addition to the two events that we've had, we've also followed up each one with a segment on Open Line where they've played clips of each event, and then we've taken questions from callers. Both presentations are also streaming online now, so we can continue to spread the word to the public that, kind of what information is out there about the plan. Next steps, Henry Cisneros will be here on March 11th talking about cities as drivers of economic opportunity. Then we've got the other four presentations spaced out every 2 weeks after that. And then we're continuing to work to drive people to participate, certainly online at talk.nashvillenext.net, Twitter, Facebook. We're also starting to get our book a planner, spread the word about that. We've done one so far. We have 17 more groups that are interested and 7 that are scheduled. We also have our street teams getting ready to launch, hopefully pretty soon, in a couple weeks, where we go out to events, go out to different places across town and snag people who don't know that they're about to participate. Questions, comments?
We are excited about the turnout so far. We're not actually sure what we were smoking when we made this very intense schedule trying to get this information out, because it's pretty tight. It's a lot tighter when you're in the middle of it than it appeared to be when you were putting the calendar together, especially when you have the kickoff on Saturday and you have the first event basically 10 days later.
With a holiday.
Yeah. But we're pleased that the community seems to be engaged in this.
All right. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Kim Hawkins to join me, and she's going to give a bulk of the presentation, but and then she'll turn it back over to me for a part of it at the end. But I wanted to share on a somewhat of a personal note how special of an opportunity this was for me to be involved with the SoBro Master Plan. SoBro is really where I sort of cut my teeth in civic engagement and urban planning, urban design, city planning, which has really kind of defined the path that I've tried to... Am I not talking to the mic? Okay. essentially, Sobro is where I cut my teeth. You guys all remember back in the mid-'90s when the Sub-Area 9 plan was done. And at that time, there was a plan to build a 6-lane thoroughfare through Sobro across the gulch, connecting east side of town to the west side of town. And both Kim and Gary Hawkins and Everton Oglesby Askew, where I worked at the time, were really involved in that, what really became more of a Franklin Street corridor project than it was a Sub-Area 9 plan. It really monopolized that plan. But so this was really a great opportunity for me, and I know for Kim and her firm as well, to be involved with this. We put together a fantastic team. When the RFP came out for this, we knew exactly who we wanted to call. Urban Design Associates out of Pittsburgh is internationally known for this type of work, and has worked all over the country and a lot over the last 10 years outside of the country. We also had several local team members, Civil Site Design Group, Parsons Brinkerhoff, of course, Hawkins Partners, don't want to leave anybody out, Varallo Public Relations, and then we also had a group out of Washington, D.C., the Eisen Group, who was looking at the market and economic factors for Sobro. So it was about a 6-month process. The city received a grant from the Department of Economic Development, Department of Commerce, that had a sunset date of end of January. So we had about 6 months to put this together, which was really pretty fortunate, I think. Sometimes it's better, Rick, to sort of squeeze it into a tight schedule and keep people thinking about it. We had several public meetings, got a lot of public input, and I think came away with a plan that is that's actually doable. Too often these plans are, I think, extraordinarily visionary, which is great for us to think that way, but often they end up on shelves because they may not be quite as practical. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim to sort of walk us through the process and some of the big picture major recommendations, and then I'll touch on neighborhoods as you all know them as we define them in our community plan.
Great. Thanks for having us here today. And just to comment on Nashville Next, I've been to both of those meetings. They were both awesome. I mean, it's like I do not know how anybody who's been to one of those could not be waiting with bated breath for the next one. So it was great. This plan, as Hunter said, it has been an absolute delight to be a part of, because I think it's how we met each other however many years ago. But where we are, 3-phase process. So, and this has been going on since August. So in December, we kind of went through that kind of deciding phase, understanding phase, exploring phase, deciding phase. In December, what's really exciting about this plan, as most of you have heard, that last stage is implementation. And many times with the master plan, it ends at the deciding phase. But part of what has happened is the city has asked Urban Design Associates and our team to continue on with exploring some of the big elements of this plan, most specifically related to exploring the thermal site as civic open space and the pedestrian bridge in the Gulch. So this is one that is immediately not going on the shelf, but immediately actually starting into the next process, which is wonderful. So today, just a little bit about what the vision is, what the market study showed, the big idea, and a little bit more about the plan. And this is kind of that overall vision kind of drawn in, and I will say UDA has some awesome illustrators, and you'll see that as we kind of go through the plan, but it certainly makes it really come alive as we go through it. Part of the process, there was a lot of public process, and then one of the first things that people did is kind of said, here are the areas that we think are problem areas. This is, in a nutshell, kind of explains some of what we dealt with. The big thing, the Gulch was noted, Gulch meaning the railroad, was noted as a problem area, and that issue of connectivity came up every time anyone opened their mouths. It was so important. And then the other one, where there are a whole lot of red dots, is the mission. And what I want to say about that and what our team says about that is not the fact that there are homeless persons, it is the fact that there is a concentration of around 1,100 homeless men in one spot. And that was, we believe, what we were really hearing through the process and why all those red dots are there. Next, and you all may know this, I think we're all going to know it better over the next couple of years, but right now, 4.5 million, a little over 4.5 million people are here in downtown per year coming to events. That includes the 2017 projections for the Music City Center, which is a little over 500,000. So we're feeling it now. We're going to feel it even more over the next couple of years, and that's an important driver as we look at the south of Broadway area. The market study, Tom Moriarty with the Eisen Group did a great job. And some of these numbers were revised during the process, actually revised upward a little bit. So you see here for residential housing, the idea of an additional 2,200 to 4,100 units projected in the next 10 years. That was one of the numbers that he actually did increase from the beginning of the study. The hotel and lodging, the 3,400 new downtown hotel rooms, that was estimated to be 8 to 12 additional hotels. Since those words were written, it seems like there's at least 17 that have been proposed. I don't know, I'm making that up. It just seems like every day I open the paper and there's another hotel proposed. So I've kind of lost count, but I think we're well on our way to making up those 3,400 downtown hotel rooms. Office space, the 2,500 or 250,000 to 550,000 square feet. Keep in mind that when Tom is looking at this as projected absorption in the next 10 years, that is the idea of these are small office. This is not the idea of somebody coming in and putting in a big, moving their headquarters into Sobro. That can happen. We welcome that to happen, but that's not included in those numbers. And then retail, that right now, we're actually pretty short on retail right now in the Sobro area, so 300 to 400,000 square feet of retail. And again, one of the things that you all know, but that a lot of people see these numbers and think, oh my gosh, that's so much. You start applying that to the footprint that we have of downtown, it's not as much as you think. So the area that we're in, and it's very hard to see that, but I think you all know it's the Broadway area going down to that to the South Loop. There's a dashed red line in there somewhere. And then this is just kind of an illustration of that, building around that core of where the convention center is, the current Hall of Fame park, and right now almost our only green space. The idea of the organizing elements which are already in place with the roundabout, KVB, Lafayette 8th, kind of coming off of that. Some of the new proposals for making some connections along Division Street in the Gulch, and the opportunities that we have of growing some of those centers where the district is, kind of going down 2nd and 3rd, expanding out a little bit, as well as opportunities related to Cummins Station in the Gulch for the more retail kind of market areas. And the plan, just a little bit about kind of where we are. One of the first things that we heard as we went into this is, first of all, there are a lot of things that we like about south of Broadway right now. We like that it's fun and quirky. There's a lot of good things about it. It has a great identity. We just want to make it better, more of what it is. And one of the issues that we don't like so much about this area right now, of course, my office is kind of right in the middle of that red bar right there, but the idea of that flood from May 2010 really caused us to change how we look at this. And so flood mitigation and looking at flood mitigation was incorporated into this plan. There's a unified flood preparedness plan that is at the same time being prepared by Metro Water Services. And so part of what we looked at is the idea that there are parallel flood mitigations that need to be in place, looking at options for how we protect our city. And that is some combination of permanent and temporary flood walls, the idea that there might be there always has to be big pumps, because part of the issue is, as you all know, the water doesn't just come over land, it's also coming up from the bottom. So parallel flood mitigation efforts are certainly one of the things that were looked at. The other thing, you can see the 500-year flood here and some of the affected area. This also has planning implications, and some of the things that were also looked at is what we need to, some opportunities, I think, for how we need to address planning and finished floor elevations, and what some of those opportunities are with some of those streets in that immediately affected area. The plan also looked at the convention center and said, what are the opportunities for the expansion for the convention center? And for this portion of the plan, TVS was involved and did some studies there. The different colors that you see there are some of the options that were explored. The First Baptist site to the north, the Methodist site to the south, the site to the south in the pink, and then the one that maybe a lot of people thought was interesting is the green, is the current Bridgestone Arena site as one of the potential expansions. The reason that that was shown is the average age of a convention center before replacement ends up being between 15 and 30 years. Bridgestone Arena is 15 years old. So it's not out of the bounds of reason to imagine that in 5 to 10 years, which is what they say would happen with the convention center, that's when you start thinking of where would it expand to, that may possibly be an option. And it's one that Metro owns right now. And then another, this is just kind of showing a little bit about the street grid. Some of the connections, this is what the plan shows right now, your current plan with some of the street connections. And then, let's see, there we go. With the division connector across here, we've looked at an option for how division might connect, looking at it a little bit more specifically with grades to see how do we do that and really provide another great crosstown connector right now. Again, one of the big things that we heard again and again, the whole Lafayette area is isolated, very, very isolated from the rest of the city. So how do we help that connectedness? Division was one of the ways to do that. And then Complete Streets. Complete Streets has been part of the executive order now for 2.5 years, so it's the idea of really looking at our street system to see how do we truly accommodate all forms of transportation. And one of the things that we believe is a critical part of Complete Streets that makes it what we refer to as more complete is the idea of introducing the green infrastructure systems into that too. So our streets are functioning from a transportation standpoint, but they're also adding to an environmental system, similar to KVB that you see here in a rendering, but now you can go look out on the street and it's really there and opening in just a couple weeks. And so part of what we see here is that connected street system and some of those remnant pieces all along Lafayette that make crossing Lafayette a challenge. And some opportunities for how to reconnect into that street grid to make it a much more clear system. I mentioned the roundabout. KVB is a green street. We're also recommending that Lafayette become a green street and Complete Street, actually narrowing that the vehicular pavement in that area, the connection of division, and then the opportunity to reconnect through some of the smaller street systems, green streets kind of through and connecting to the overall transportation grid and network. And this shows a little bit right now of what the existing system is with one-way streets and two-way streets. Part of what the plan recommends studying more is actually reducing the number of one-way streets. You see the one-way streets there in blue and making more of those streets two-way. Now, as many of you may know, there is an RFQ out right now that came out of this study that actually looks at studying this in much more detail, a more complete traffic and planning, downtown mobility traffic and planning study that I think proposals are due in mid-March. So that went out through Metro Public Works, again, a couple weeks ago, another way that this plan has immediately started turning into implementation. So these were the recommendations of our group, but we understand that it needs a lot more study before it happens. Parks. One of the things that we heard a whole lot about from the beginning in this plan is there is no green space in the south of Broadway. And that's not true. There's a little bit of green space. But right now we have a total of about 7 acres. And part of what we really wanted to look at is how do we incorporate that at a variety of levels? How do we have a hierarchy that goes from larger regional parks down to the neighborhood parks and those that are really serving resident amenities? So the hierarchy of those spaces was really important, and that those ideas also be captured in the private development world as well, that it's not just incumbent upon the public land to do that, but that private really has a lot to offer. Part of what you see here is kind of that overall system. Again, thermal in the top right as civic open space was really important. I mentioned 7 acres right now. This plan recommended an additional almost 49 acres of park space. What that does, and you can kind of see it here, the color's a little bit off, but what we really tried to do is develop a whole series of these neighborhood parks. Those end up being those kind of green squares that for the most part go from 2 to 3 acres each. So smaller neighborhood parks, the regional parks, thermal, and the large area, the kind of the Rolling Mill Hill, the bottoms area right there below Rolling Mill Hill, which would make awesome sports fields that we need more and more of. And then the interconnectedness of this series of green streets. Now, when we're saying we've added 49 acres of park, that does not include anything related to greenways, green streets, or anything like that. That's purely park space. One of the fun ones I'll just point out, right there along the the bottom of the loop, the south loop, there's that light green. You all might know that as the area next to Frugal McDougal. But it's the coolest view of downtown that there is. You come in over the interstate, and right now you usually see this giant cow or horse or whatever it is next to the carpet barn. We think there would be a better foreground than that to be able to see our awesome city. So we kind of developed that as kind of a skyline park along the Division Street connector that would also include a greenway or two-way cycle track. We did include some opportunities related to this campus. There's a lot of green on this campus, but it's not very well utilized as true park, and yet there are more and more residents in the immediate area of this. The Children's Theater is right over here. So within each of those, we kind of looked at more opportunities. This one might be more related to children, and Hunter can talk more about that related to the neighborhoods as we go. And so this starts to show all of that in our cool little illustration of the addition of the Howard campus, Shelby Street Bridge, so all of the things that are existing right now, and then starting to add in the rest of Sobro and that whole series of additional park system. That's the Skyline Park. And the distribution of the neighborhood parks, the potential of the Landport area to become an elevated park, the connection to the Gulch, opportunities for park space within the Gulch, and then tied on top of that in yellow is the bicycle network, because all of that really works together. So in the end, we have this whole connected system. The Railroad Land Bridge, we mentioned this was just an image that we showed, but again, I would say almost more than any other item, that was our number one thing that came up. Everybody said we've got to connect across the Gulch. So this shows one of the opportunities, how that might work, and just an example of the idea of really having a grand staircase that really encourages people to come on across. And then public art, I mentioned stormwater as one of the things that gets included in a complete street. We also really talked quite a bit about the integration of public art into everything that we do, and that the public art needs to be an integral part of our overall public rights of way, so that we're incorporating not just transportation, complete streets, but green and culturally vibrant. And with that, I'll let Hunter talk a little bit more about neighborhoods.
Thanks, Kim. We had about a 50-member advisory committee that we met with several times throughout the process, and one of the first comments we got was that the name of the project was wrong. It was called the Sobro Master Plan. Well, so many of the constituents think of Sobro really as the area close to the arena, Korean Veterans Boulevard, close to the district. The Gulch has its own brand. Rolling Mill Hill has its own brand. Lafayette neighborhood, are all different areas within the study area. And so we renamed the project the South of Broadway Master Plan, recognizing the neighborhoods the planning department identifies in the community plan as the Gulch, Sobro, Rolling Mill Hill, Rutledge Hill, and the Lafayette neighborhood. So I'll drill down on those 4 neighborhoods a little bit more. The Gulch really has is well on its way. I mean, with everything that's happened, and there's a master plan that it guides the development in the Gulch that's overseen by MDHA and a master developer. That, along with the downtown code, we felt like really allowed us to not necessarily put a whole lot of attention in the Gulch area. However, there were a few things that did come out of the public meetings that were needs. One interesting thing I found was that the Gulch is almost in its next generation. It's sort of second generation of residents. You know, a lot of people bought there maybe 9-10 years ago. They might have been single. They may have married by now. They may be having children. They've got dogs and so on. And so the need for open space, potentially a play park, as well as a dog park, was identified as an opportunity. You'll see we've got a couple of places within the plan that identify those. It's a little hard to see on this. There's a triangular piece of property right down by the railroad tracks that we think would make a great play park and dog park. Down there it is privately owned, so it would have to be acquired by the city, but it's near the heart of the Gulch, and then there's a couple of other small neighborhood parks as well. Secondly, connectivity was really important. Again, as Kim mentioned, we heard over and over how disconnected the Gulch is from the rest of the south of Broadway area. And so with both the new pedestrian bridge recommendation connecting across the railroad tracks, as well as the Division Street connector, we believe this will really begin to tie in the Gulch to the entire south of Broadway area, as well as potentially help sort of catalyze development in the Lafayette neighborhood and sort of the southern part of the Gulch neighborhood where it's already seeing some development. I'll skip across to Rolling Mill Hill and Rutledge Hill. Again, Rolling Mill Hill is guided by the master plan that MDHA oversees and is well on its way. Similar issues, though, in this area in terms of connectivity and open space. We recommended that with the next phase of development of Rolling Mill Hill, that a significant portion of public open space be included in that. That ended up translating into the RFP that MDHA put out recently, where they're requiring the developers to include open space as part of the development of 3 of the remaining blocks there at Rolling Mill Hill. Several other opportunities. The Civic Design Center a number of years ago did a study showing the end of Academy Place, which terminates at a pedestrian bridge across the railroad or across the interstate to the south there, becoming a little neighborhood parklet. Right now, the experience of crossing that pedestrian bridge isn't a great one. Enhancing the bridge, creating a small little neighborhood park at the terminus of Academy Place would be great. Likewise, there's a large green space that we know is Captain Ryman's Garden. There's a historic marker there. There at, I guess it's between 2nd and is that Rutledge? As you come down the hill there where the radio station is, we think that's a great opportunity. Could be a neighborhood community garden, potentially. And then, as Kim mentioned, the bottoms down below. This may be further off in the future as we see the density continue to increase in this area and the critical mass, the need for some large park areas and play fields. That area down below the railroad tracks by the river, it's in the floodplain, would make a great regional park. And then again, connectivity, really enhancing the existing connectivity that's already there with some of the complete street ideas that and the diagrams that you saw that Kim showed. Connecting east-west, connecting the Howard School to the Lafayette neighborhood, connecting the Lafayette neighborhood back to the river, through Rutledge Hill, to Rolling Mill Hill, to the Promenade, the Greenway, and enhancing those connections along the way.
If you would, back up.
Sure.
The space across from Howard School all the way down 2nd, I guess, to the west side of 2nd, where the white area is, what is that?
In the plan, that is white area. It's part of the Lafayette neighborhood, and I'm not sure we
Yeah, every block didn't get.
Every block didn't specifically get rendered. There's a number of historic structures along there. I think the patterns one thing we did was we looked at the downtown code, and we looked at it really closely to see if we had any recommended changes. And we really felt like the downtown code supported all of the ideas here. And so the patterns that the forms and patterns that the downtown code is going to require is consistent with what's recommended in the plan. But we didn't design every block. So now to Sobro. Again, we basically use the same boundaries as the downtown community plan does. Again, the thermal site, we think, is the big opportunity. We heard a number of people say, we need a bicentennial mall in the Sobro area. We need something like that. Well, we have the opportunity on our riverfront where we've already started investing, and we already own the property. And to us, it made a lot of sense to create a large public space that would serve first the residents of Nashville and the residents of downtown, certainly office workers, but visitors as well. So we'll go into Sobro. This is the model that the planning department provided for us, showing what's possible under the downtown code. Obviously, we're not going to. Those are 30-story buildings there in the middle. 30-story buildings are allowed. We're obviously not going to see 30-story buildings on every parcel, especially because of the way the block network and the parcels are currently divided. It's difficult to assemble the land. The parking really ends up driving what can be developed. And so, as I'm sure the planning department has shared with us before, we're not seeing people necessarily take advantage of the density that's allowed within the downtown code. So that may be something to look at. But we did feel like it was appropriate, the massing and forms that the downtown code allowed for. That's what, of course, Sobro looks like today. Still lots of parking lots. There was a big concern raised during the study of, what is Korean Veterans Boulevard ultimately going to look like? Is it going to be all limited service hotels, which might not be or are difficult to carry out the vision that I think the downtown community plan spells out and this plan spells out? And so we took a close look at the MDHA's design guidelines for Korean Veterans Boulevard and made some specific recommendations and changes recommended changes to those guidelines that will help assure the activity that we anticipate, that again the downtown plan anticipates along Korean Veterans Boulevard. And one of the things even though we're not recommending reducing the height in other locations, we would like to see and think it's critical to do whatever we can to emphasize the importance of critical mass around the roundabout. Right now, it's a big void in terms of activity, in terms of physical mass, in terms of the street and pedestrian activity. And so by getting as much mass around that space in and around the roundabout, we'll create the critical mass that will sort of fill that gap that's currently between the district, the Sobro, sort of the Country Music Hall of Fame area, the convention center, and then, of course, the Gulch with the pedestrian connection across. It all ties it together. We also feel like south of Broadway, the continued expansion of the district with additional entertainment, retail, restaurant opportunities should be emphasized. It may take on a little bit different flavor. It already is with some of the restaurants that have opened down there. They're probably catering more to the local crowds, which is great with the Symphony Hall, events at the arena. We see that continuing and should be encouraged as development happens. This is what KVB, of course, looked like last summer when we started the project. And this is what's envisioned. 8 to 12, 15-story buildings we think are probably more likely than the 30-story towers, and maybe more appropriate in terms of creating that, avoiding the canyon effect if we did have 30-story towers all the way along, but with opportunities certainly around the roundabout and other key intersections for taller structures. The street is designed to accommodate that. And then finally, the Lafayette neighborhood, which really interestingly, I think, at least for me, it was sort of a aha moment to realize that we have sort of a crescent of development activity that's happened over the last 20 years, really, from the Gulch along Broadway and Demumbrian, and then around to Rolling Mill Hill. And what's interesting about that is it's consistent with where the redevelopment districts are. It makes a lot of sense, but we've got a big hole in the south of Broadway area right now that's not within a redevelopment district, and hasn't been able to take advantage of some of the possible incentives. And so we're recommending MDHA look at the Lafayette neighborhood as either expansion of some of the existing redevelopment districts or the creation of a new redevelopment district. Again, you guys know it, but underutilized, lots of pavement, asphalt, lots of parking areas. Lafayette specifically, as Kim mentioned, it was identified as really being too wide. If you notice next time you drive down, maybe with the exception of during rush hour, but I would suggest that even during rush hour, Lafayette doesn't have as many cars on it as it certainly could handle with 6 lanes. So we're suggesting essentially a street diet, turning it into a complete street that accommodates transit, pedestrians, bicycles, narrows the road, and creates the kind of place that people will want to invest private development along. Here's the diagram that shows those are the redevelopment districts. So you can see sort of the crescent, and it makes a lot of sense when you look at that map why not much has happened in the white area there. So again, what it looks like today. Our proposal, again, consistent with the downtown code. We see this as a sort of medium-scale, mixed-use neighborhood, really, and with several, you see several neighborhood parks, including one that's a little bit hard to see, but at the terminus of Fifth Avenue. As Kim mentioned, we looked at, and Public Works specifically asked us to look at every one of the intersections along Lafayette, because as you know, there's these crazy intersections, strange parcels, very difficult to develop, very difficult to walk. And so we looked at each one of those intersections, tried to clean them up, or recommending some streets to be removed, others to be connected, new little street connections to occur. And one that sort of unfolded out of that process was at the very southern terminus of Fifth Avenue at Lafayette is a neighborhood park as it terminates there. And so Avenue of the Arts and extending Avenue of the Arts down beyond KVB all the way to Lafayette is one of our top recommendations, terminating on the park there. We had to shift the park so Sieb Tuck's office building wouldn't be demolished, but I think
because it was a historic structure. It had nothing to do with the fact that it belonged to Sieb.
That's right. That's right.
Everything to do with the fact they just put all those solar panels on the top of it, though, right?
Right. And then we also think the Division Street Connector, as I mentioned before, is really critical. I'm not sure we ever heard the exact history, but the way anybody that's driven up to the end of Division sees it. It was probably intended to go over the railroad tracks, but it just dead ends now. And so we think it could be great for the Gulch. We think it'd be great for the Lafayette neighborhood to help catalyze that area and just connect the Rolling Mill Hill, the river, Rolling Mill Hill, Howard School, all the way through the neighborhood to the Gulch.
Wouldn't that help the Adventure Science Center?
I think so. Yeah. So that's what Lafayette looks like today, and this is what's envisioned as a complete street. This is Fifth Avenue. We want to, especially in the Lafayette neighborhood, because there's still some sort of what I might call funky relics in the Lafayette that exist in the Lafayette neighborhood, and much like what was done in the Gulch, where some of the old one-story, two-story old brick warehouse buildings that didn't seem to have much architectural value at the time before the Gulch was developed. they saved some of those, and we feel like by preserving some of the existing buildings that are there, you can add some funkiness, which we heard from the vice mayor, keep it funky, but it also helps sort of galvanize a community, and it helps make it feel like it's developed over time and wasn't just one development that all happened. If you imagine the Gulch, if they would have scraped the entire Gulch and not left the Javanko building and the Braid building and some of those older structures, it would be more vanilla than it is. So that's Fifth Avenue looking north. That's what it could be. You'll notice, I'll flip back, those are some of the existing buildings, could be transformed, much like they did with Mercury View Lofts. You could build up through, build residential or office up above, but still create a great streetscape out of what's already there. And then this is one of the little neighborhood streets. That's an old, I believe it was an old ice house back on the south side of Lafayette with a neighborhood park. One of the neighborhood parks is recommended in this location. And again, just the transformation, reuse of some of those existing buildings, activating mixed use, moderate scale throughout the Lafayette area. We also took a look at the downtown circulator and have a couple of recommendations in terms of changes. When they started the construction on the convention center, they changed the green line. It used to run down to Mumbrian between the Frist Center and Cummins Station. Cummins Station is such an activity center that they moved it up to Broadway, and it really isn't getting the same kind of ridership, certainly from Cummins Station in that area. And so we're recommending we move the green line back down to Demumbrian. We're also recommending moving the purple line over to connect closer to the convention center, as well as on into beyond Broadway. And then I think one of the ideas that the MTA was really interested in was looking at a fourth circulator, and that would be what we called a hotel circulator. As you know, when you go to a convention, you don't go straight out to dinner usually. After your sessions, you usually want to go back to your hotel, then you go to the nightclub or to the restaurant. And so the idea of connecting all the hotels to the entertainment districts, to the Gulch, possibly even to West End in the meantime, while there's still a lot of hotels that will be used out on the West End corridor, for the convention center, we think is a good idea. So that's it. Hopefully we're good on time.
I know that Phil and Andre and myself, about 6 or 8 years ago, went over to the Corps of Engineers. At that time, Wolf Creek Dam was a major concern and still is. The flood level that May of 2012, 2010. We were told that if Wolf Creek Dam were to burst, that the water would get up broad all the way to the Bridgestone Arena door. I don't think that showed that quite that far in that diagram. Was that taking into consideration just the flood of 2010?
Kim, you want to address that? Kim's been looking.
Just a little bit. The
really
Unified
close.
Flood Preparedness Plan right now is looking at providing some protection to the 500-year flood level plus 3 feet. That's what they're looking at right now. So that would provide some sort of flood protection up to 524, which is very high. 521 is the 500-year flood, and that's about the level that it got to in 2010, varied just a little bit on that diagram. But that still has to go through a very long process, the Corps of Engineers process, which is, I think, another 3 years for that to be finalized. But that's what they're looking at right now, which, based on my understanding, that would accommodate another flood like 2010, and I think would also protect in the case of the Wolf Creek, because it's 3 feet above.
Who are you saying is suggesting it?
That's Metro Water Services and the Unified Flood Preparedness Plan. So that was just released. The Unified Flood Preparedness Preliminary Plan was just released at the end of January. And so it's just one part of a very long process. And from what I got from Metro Water Services, I think 2 days ago, it's 3 more years to go through all the formal processes. But that's what we're hearing today.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
It's really exciting. I mean, I could all sit here and tell you all the things I think we really like about it, but can we say a couple more ideas?
Absolutely.
Awesome, yes.
Well, if you think of the 4 neighborhoods and the things, the trends you're talking about, needing parks and children and all that, and while it is still a public community, we need schools. And I know that's not land use exactly planning, but why not? You know, we can
Right.
add art, we can add stormwater. So could we figure out a way to integrate some vertical campuses, school campuses that go, you know, like in Europe and lots of places where they're real vertical buildings, and maybe they have access to a green space in each of the neighborhoods somewhere.
And schools were talked about a lot. I'm not sure how they're written into the plan, but there was a lot of discussion
Right.
about the need for school, and some of that, I know some of it was the idea that we know we want to have some schools downtown. We're not sure, we know we don't have a population downtown yet that can support that, and it'll probably be some time before that happens.
Sure.
But the schools was brought up an awful lot.
We just have to allow for it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be precluded, for sure.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, as much as we all think about connectivity, and this is all huge improvements within this area that we're looking at, you probably talked about this too, but you can't put it in every presentation, but then when do we start to look at the connectivity outside, beyond the loop?
Right.
Are there places that we're considering that, you know, like we do with our subdivisions, are there future connectivity things that you'll discuss probably to some of these outlying areas beyond the loop?
We didn't get much beyond the loop. We did talk about
You're not supposed to
the
when you're
gateways,
summer, but-
and we, you know, there was a brief look at, and we hope the mobility study, the upcoming mobility study, will look at this. But we understand how access to the interstates right now is really constricted and creates a lot of traffic problems in downtown right now, even all the way over to First Avenue and Hermitage, where everyone's trying to get out away from the loop and onto the interstate at, is it Fessler's Lane, I guess? Is there a better way to connect to 65 South? You know, we think there might be room down there to be able to create a better connection to 65 South directly from Sobro. Obviously, those can be very those can disturb the fabric of downtown.
But there have been a number of studies that have shown how that can happen.
Actually, I meant like on the ground
To the neighborhoods.
Out Murfreesboro Road and out,
Yeah.
Actually,
permeating the interstate, going under it, or what
Right.
we're going to do to.
the ones that
tie
we looked
into
at
these-
there was reinforcing, and it is kind of shown in the overall, but reinforcing 6. 6 is going to be an awesome connection, and it's the one that goes straight from the Convention Center to the Venture Science Center.
Yeah.
So that plan does show 6 as being reinforced, you know, improved to make that a stronger connection. It's one of our few that we can really make that connection. So to a very small degree, yes, but we really think there's a lot more work that needs to be done on that, and we really do think that downtown mobility plan should.
I was just going to say, I think that's where we have, I mean, there's some that has to include that future thinking
Yeah.
about lines
Yes.
beyond their assignment.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. And the plan makes mention of the study that the Civic Design Center did, and I think it was a student study of looking at capping the interstate on the west side as certainly a concept to explore. And, you know, anything we can do to begin to tie Midtown to downtown and the other neighborhoods as well, across the interstate, under the interstate, above the interstate is
Well, as much as we
absolutely.
think about South Nashville these days, where this is the heart, how does South Nashville get there?
Yeah.
Right. It's a real good
This is
point.
one investor.
Yeah.
This is great, y'all.
Well, the full plan, this was just the highlights, but the full plan is on both the Downtown Partnerships website as well as the Music City Center's website. So if there's no more questions, I guess we can.
And it's
break.
been incorporated into the Nashville Next plan, so I mean, music will kind of sit right in that. So.
Great. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Several times we were talking about